Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sauradeep Sarkar, your host for today's webinar. It gives me immense pleasure welcoming you all to live webinar on the theme of Flex Capacity Services. Choose the best of your data center. This webinar is hosted by Cyber Media Research in association with HPE. For the duration of presentation, all participants' line will be in listen-only mode. After the presentation, we'll be having a question and answer session for which the instructions will be provided during the start of Q&A session. And please remember, your feedback is very important for us, so kindly submit your feedback at the end of the webinar. Now, I would like to hand over the floor to Mr. Apulak Ghosh, who is Lead Consultant, Emerging Technologies Research, CMR, who will share 6 trends that are shaping the enterprise data centers. Thank you, and over to you, Mr. Ghosh.
Thanks, Sauradeep. Thanks for the warm welcome, and a very, very warm welcome to all our audience listening and joining the webinar today. Right. So my name is Apulak Ghosh. I am part of Cyber Media Research, and as a part of my portfolio, I've been tracking the emerging technologies space for a while now, which includes amongst many other things, digital transformation, IoT, cloud, virtualization, security. So today, as you're all aware, we'll talk about the data center, right? And I'm talking to a very relevant audience because all of you are fully aware of the fact that, how the data center in its various forms, avatars, has been, it has changed over the course of years, right? So we used to have various types of data centers. We had consolidation at one phase. We had, locational challenges in one space. So the data center has evolved over the last couple of years, and my idea and objective is to take you through how the data center has changed and evolved over the last couple of years, and what are the reasons behind it. So if you see, coming down to my next slide, so we at CMR, we feel that these 6 are one of the key fundamental reasons why the data center has changed the way we see the change, right? Obviously, goes without saying, the advent of, broadband penetration, smartphones, has risen the way we interact with each other, be it at a B2B standpoint or a B2C standpoint, which has led eventually to a rise of digital content, which has impacted in a big way how we analyze data, so which gave us to the advent of big data and analytics. So if you look at it in some way or the other, all these 5 components, leaving out smart city, which is itself a big conglomerate in its own, but be it rise of digital content, broadband penetration, big data, social media, and smartphones, they have something or the other to do with each other. They are connected with dotted lines. The very fact that smartphones, there has been a huge uptake of smartphones in India, something that we have never seen in the last so many years. The smartphones has really changed the way India interacts, if I may say, right? And that has led to, a lot of social media applications, right? That has led to a lot of digital content on the rise. And by digital content, we're not talking about just structured data. We're talking about a lot of unstructured data, which led to a big surge in big data and analytics as well, right? And all of this, while it was being supported by smartphones probably at a consumer level, at an enterprise standpoint, we also saw a huge surge in the broadband penetration. While there's yet obviously a long way to go as far as broadband penetration goes, it is not probably at par or in sync where we are as far as smartphones are concerned, but it's a road ahead which looks promising, right? The last but not least, smart cities is an area and an opportunity which we hear very often a lot about. Seems to be a big area of opportunity for a lot of end-user organizations as well as IT vendors. So fundamentally, in a capsule, these are 6 of the key drivers of how data centers and why data centers have changed the way they have changed, right? And to take you one by one, I'll now like to talk about, fundamentally the 6 trends that we have seen, over the last couple of years shaping the data centers. So as you all know, data centers in India are hosting a whole lot of IT infrastructures. And amongst all of you here, you might be companies who are representing, e-commerce businesses as well. So, to handle the massive surge of, online traffic and to reduce network outages, there are a lot of organizations which are now incorporating hyperscaling, So migrating the infrastructure onto cloud, allows businesses to keep their networks free from bandwidth crunches, allows a smoother customer experience online, while streaming videos and all forms of static information. So hyperscaling is definitely a trend that we at CMR have been noticing, and is going to stay for some years to come, right? So because it's the nature of business how things are changing. Everything is dynamic, and you would always want to be on the pedestal to reach to the market as quickly as you can. So hyperscaling definitely helps, right? Moving on, security. I think no discussion in technology, be it in India or elsewhere, can be complete without talking about security. Security is something that has been the talk, regardless of what technology we're talking about, be it cloud, be it data center, be it virtualization, be it IoT, be it smart cities, be it digital transformation, right? So obviously, nobody has a foolproof solution as far as security is concerned, but we always try at our ends to make it as secure as we can, So while data breaches continue to garner a major, the majority of security-related headlines, security definitely has become a data center availability issue as well, So as more and more devices get connected to enable simpler management and eventual automation, there are threat vectors which have also risen. So as I just told you in the penultimate slide, the 2 slides back, that with the rise of smartphones and analytics and social media, more and more devices are getting connected to our data center. So obviously, which is also rising, which gives a rise to the threat vectors, as we know. So data center professionals are, adding more security to their growing list of priorities, and beginning to seek solutions that help them, identify their vulnerabilities and improve their responses to attacks. Because an attack could be in unlimited shapes and sizes and coming from God knows where, right? So, and you have a very recent attack, which I'm sure you've all been aware of, like the ID Delhi and ITBHU websites getting hacked, the EarnIt website was hacked. So these are very critical data points that we need to protect. So, management gateways that consolidate data from multiple devices, are kind of potentially a solution area that we can look into. And with some modifications, they can, identify unsecured ports across the critical infrastructure pieces and provide early warning of denial of service attacks. That's one of the ways that we feel we can go ahead. Moving on, hybrid internal clouds. So, I'm sure we are all aware of the advantages public cloud offers us. Somewhere we just spoke about hyperscaling, right? But at the same time, when we talk about one of the biggest challenges around cloud adoption, we always end up talking about, security. So, what is the middle path? Everybody knows hybrid is probably the way to go forward, especially amongst large organizations. So, a lot of these prominent organizations that at least I have spoken to are already, shifting their focus towards hosting hybrid internal clouds, to assimilate the ever-increasing network traffic into their functioning. So hybrid cloud infrastructures involve, connecting 2 separate clouds, as you're aware, one internal, one external, and allowing seamless transfer of data and applications using identity-based user access controls. So how does it help? Such cloud infrastructures, help mitigate that any input-output latency dependencies for storage. And in addition, these internal clouds also help in augmenting IT capabilities and providing a robust fault tolerance. Because as I said, in some way or the other, the hybrid internal clouds kind of is the prefix marriage for, the best of both the worlds. You need the competency and the robustness of a private cloud or a data center, yet at the same time you would want the flexibility that public cloud offers. So the answer probably to a very large extent, with some tweaking here and there, comes in the form of hybrid internal clouds, right? Moving on, edge computing, right? So the ever-changing dynamics, of internet usage has culminated, into rising demands for data center decentralization. and which has enabled micro data centers to foray into mainstream infrastructure management practices. So I'll just give you an example here. So, which is, it has resulted in more and more businesses actually expanding their cloud-based content delivery capabilities to users that are closer to the network's edge. So usually it could be a 2-tier town or 3-tier town through micro data center. So as I said, that is what I'm saying. So data center as an area has really taken various forms, shapes and sizes. There was a time where we had multiple data center points. And then there was a point when everybody spoke about, why should we have so many data centers? Let's consolidate all of them. So we started consolidating all of them. But then, as we are all aware, the real opportunity for India really lies not only in the urban, top-tier metros, but in the tier 2, tier 3 towns as well, and that's where the true opportunity lies. And that's why edge computing becomes that much more critical, because you would want to be as close as you can to your client base, which is why the concept of micro data centers really helps, because as I said earlier, there is still a long distance to go as far as a robust broadband mechanism is concerned. You might have the right broadband facility as far as top towns are concerned, but that is not the answer when we talk about tier 2 and tier 3 towns, right? So edge computing is in many ways the way to go forward, right? Then you have speed to market, right? So speed to market clearly for every business, and I'm not just talking about IT here, is one of the key drivers of the companies these days, developing their, the bulk of their data center capabilities today and capacities. And they found, the traditional silos between, the engineering and construction phases can be cumbersome and unproductive. So we need to make sure that these two work in tandem or in parallel, and make sure that their organizations work to make sure that we reach the market as soon as we can. So as a result, they are embracing a turnkey approach to data center designing in its core and deployment that leverages integrated, modular designs, off-site constructions, and disciplined project management. So as a consequence of which, vendors are bringing together infrastructure experts, design and engineering capabilities, and sophisticated project management to deliver turnkey capability which can build better data centers and faster data centers. Last but not least, going green. So there's one important trend, at least I feel, is going to form the shape as we go forward as the future of data centers in India is concerned. And we're not just talking about going green from purely from a carbon footprint is concerned, but there are a lot of, as we see and as we've been noticing, the advantages go just beyond carbon footprint. So data centers are definitely now working towards lesser energy consumption, reducing their energy footprint. And subsequently, data centers are now also working towards achieving better efficiency, newer cooling techniques, and improved power usage effectiveness. And data centers services do not stop here, though. As I mentioned, they are scaling their efficiency beyond green. They through employing other efficiency techniques such as water usage efficiency, economizers, evaporative cooling technologies, and so on and so forth. Because this is an area which, with the massive way we are adopting technology, the use and advent of IT infrastructure, this is an area where the government eventually might have to take notice, and we all should be well prepared to safeguard our interests in the way we build a capacity. So going green is definitely one of the go-to areas that one needs to focus on. So that is it from my end. At least the way I would like to at least seal this off is, the data center market is growing really fast, and it's as a result of which there's an increase in digital evolution. So higher the amount of digital content produced, more the number of data centers required to host and run all these mission-critical applications. Some of the key sectors that have always been the forefront of data center growth has been traditionally BFSI, telecom, insurance, and IT industries. But going forward, we definitely see a lot of greenfield verticals like healthcare, the e-commerce sectors also forming shape and showing the way as far as data center future is concerned. That's it from my end. A wonderful webinar, folks. Over to you, Shodi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ghosh, for setting up the platform for today's webinar. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to the next speaker, Mr. Anurag Gupta, who is a country business head, flexible capacity, HPE, to discuss on private cloud benefits with the economics of public cloud. Thank you, and over to you, Mr. Gupta.
So good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for taking time off your busy schedule to attend this. So we've got this offering called flexible capacity, which is a consumption-based model. It's an on-premise model, so on-premise as a service. Okay. Now, why on-premise as a service? What are the issues that customers are facing when they think about infrastructure in their data center? Okay, which is what I'm going to talk about. Okay, and this whole debate about public cloud. Should I be on public cloud? Should I be on premise? What is the right model? Should it be hybrid? I wanted to talk a little bit about, at least HPE's views about these things. Okay, so as we're talking to a lot of customers, looking to, industry analysts and so on, as to what exactly is the problem a lot of customers are facing in their data center. Okay. And some of the top ones, that we see on the left side of your screen, long procurement and implementation cycle. Okay, and a lot of customers, sometimes say that, while they kind of plan ahead of time and so on, but digital transformation is forcing them to, constantly look at ad hoc projects which probably aren't planned for. And each time CIO goes back, to his investors or to the CFO, and, it's kind of a long process. A lot of times the funding doesn't get approved and the messages, kind of just manage within, whatever you have, or sometimes why don't you come back with a revenue plan? And, a lot of CIOs kind of struggle with that. I mean, revenue plan is more for business people than IT folks, but anyway, so a lot of issues around procurement, high capital expenditure, budget's not getting approved and so on. The ability to handle bursts and peaks. So what a lot of customers land up doing is over-provisioning or significantly over-provisioning. So whatever budget comes through, grab as much of infrastructure as you can for that price, maybe get some volume discounts from the vendors and so on. And, leads to a situation where there's a lot of capacity in there, and that has, cascading cost effects like, power, cooling, equipment going out of warranty earlier, and then having to pay an AMC cost and things like that. So a lot of challenges in terms of, infrastructure at the data center. As per a Frost & Sullivan user survey, high maintenance cost was one of the top reasons as a challenge at, the data center. Similarly, capital budget constraints, keeping up with new technology and things like that. So what's the real solution to this whole problem? One could think of it as, okay, I can move to the cloud. The cloud has its own challenges, okay? Unpredictability of cost, this whole thing called bandwidth cost, downloading your own data. Uploading is fine, but downloading your own data may cost some money, stuff like that. So a lot of issues, I'm sure most of you are aware of them. But, from our perspective, what we think will be a good solution to the problem is something that's quick and easy to implement, which can scale, which is like a cloud-like model, but instead of you going to the cloud comes to you, to your data center. Okay? You can choose your own infrastructure. In the cloud, you pretty much kind of maybe define a IOP with storage, you define a VM size, but what if you need physical infrastructure? Your applications may not be all virtualized and things like that. And of course, a guaranteed SLA. So it shouldn't be best effort basis, but a guaranteed SLA like one expects in the cloud. Okay, something very similar in terms of the performance, the availability, and scalability, and so on. Okay, so mostly, these are the reasons, which we think can kind of solve the problem. Now, each customer across the board in an organization has his own point of view, maybe on the same project. From a CIO's perspective, it may be, I need to deliver something very quickly. business is constantly pressurizing the CIO in terms of, the time to market and, how quickly and securely and, all of that needs to come in. Sometimes this businesses even bypass, the IT department and create what we call the shadow IT, going and signing up, swiping a credit card and picking up cloud space and things like that. Sometimes even compromising organizational policies, but all done with the intent of increasing revenues and so on. So nobody questions the intent there. Similarly, CFO, for every investment decision that comes to him, it's always a choice between, what kind of makes more sense from a shareholder perspective, and he may or may not share the view of the CIO. Okay. Line of business and developers, of course, want everything today or yesterday, and they want to be able to constantly innovate, create new things, and so on. And then finally, when it comes to infrastructure operations, they'd love to keep everything very, very stable. So, within the organization itself, the various push and pulls in terms of, trying to, get that workload up and running. So, really, there's a choice between either keeping it on your premise or keeping it into somebody else's data center. Okay. It could be hosted, could be in a public cloud, could be in a private cloud, so on. Okay. And what really is the right mix? So workloads change constantly, and we feel that, having to choose between the two is increasingly becoming difficult. A lot of players or organizations, enterprises who went out into the cloud, people like Dropbox and so on, have moved back into an on-premise kind of model. But ultimately, all the CIOs I speak to agree on one thing, that hybrid is the way to go. You can't put especially business-critical apps into a public cloud. Somebody was giving me an example yesterday that, the entire organization was dependent on SAP. And if they put the SAP in the cloud, it's a manufacturing organization, and, if the system is down for 30 minutes, maybe because of connectivity or, whatever issue, the entire manufacturing would stop. And, those are the implications of, probably putting business critical applications. Others feel that, especially in the cities, it's not so much of an issue. Connectivity may be more of a problem in remote areas in India and so on. Okay. So each one of it, whether you choose to keep it on-premise or you keep it in someone else's data center, both of them have their pros and cons. Okay. And getting the right mix is a constant challenge for every CIO. Okay. So we have this flexible capacity option where we are saying you don't really have to choose. We will provide you capacity in your data center, okay, in a very flexible, scalable model, agile, and you pay for what you use. What you don't use, you don't pay for. Along with that, we've also got this Microsoft Azure tie-up where we provide you, public cloud space through the same contract. So what we're saying is we're providing you 4 things. One is, on the same contract, we're providing you both, your on-premise, infrastructure as a service. We are also providing you, the Microsoft Azure public cloud space, same contract. Single invoice to process. So, at the end of every month, we generate a bill for the capacity used on-premise and for the capacity used in the public cloud space. Okay, so a single bill. Okay. A single support team. So, the team that supports you for on-premise also supports you in the public cloud. Now, public cloud is great when everything is going fine, but the day there's an issue and you need to get some support, then it becomes a little challenging in terms of, do you have the right contract levels? Is support coming in a timely manner? Is there a person to speak to who will take the responsibility of kind of solving issues and looking at your perspective and things like that? So we're saying one single support team. And lastly, because we have a worldwide tie-up with Microsoft, we also extend some discounts, on their retail published side of pricing. Okay. So 4 things that we bring to the table when it comes to public cloud space, plus, whatever capacity that needs to be in your data center will also be provided to you in a pay-per-use services kind of a model. Okay. So when you think about your journey towards a consumption-based model, okay, there are 2 kinds of arrangements really you can go into. One is what we call the financial arrangement, which you've been doing, in the past or you're currently doing, where you look to buy equipment in a capital purchase motion, depreciate it in your books and, all of that. Or one can look at a leasing kind of option where because of cash flows, you say, okay, I kind of don't want to pay upfront for all that equipment. I don't mind some cost of money, but at the end of it, I'm going to pay a monthly or quarterly bill out. And all the equipment is still mine. I've chosen my architecture and so on, but it stays within my data center. At the end, when I've paid this off, all the equipment belongs to me, and so on. Okay, so that's a financial arrangement. On the other side, you can also have a services arrangement. On the extreme right of your screen is this public cloud, okay, which is very, very flexible to acquire. I mean, you decide to kind of acquire some space in the public cloud. You can pretty much decide what you want, go and swipe a credit card, in 10, 15 minutes, you can have that, capacity available to you. Okay, extremely flexible. But obviously, over a long term, it becomes expensive. It's unpredictable. Like I was mentioning earlier, there's bandwidth cost. Uploading your data is free of cost, but every time you want to download your own data for anything, analysis, for any of the activities that you need to perform with that data, then it becomes chargeable. You can't predict how much cost is going to be there. And that's really what's leading to, hybrid cloud also kind of becoming a big initiative for a lot of organizations across the world. So flexible capacity sits in the domain of hybrid cloud. Okay, you have an on-premise piece, you have the public cloud piece through Azure, like I was mentioning. Okay, so and in terms of a construct, in terms of an arrangement, it's services arrangement. Okay, typically a flexible capacity contract is between 3 and 7 years in terms of duration. Okay. So explaining a little more on flexible capacity, what we do here is you request for a particular capacity in your data center. Okay, we come and install that capacity for you along with a local buffer. Okay, so an additional headroom, so you don't have to over-provision. If you're requiring that capacity in lease, you would still over-provision. Okay, here you don't have to do the over-provisioning. You take what you need. We install a little bit of extra headroom that's mutually agreed between us. The requested capacity is the architecture of your choice, the models of your choice, and so on. So as you start using it, what you use for, you pay. What you don't use for, you don't pay. Okay, and since there's no upfront payment in this model, okay, it's not about a best effort SLA. It's a guaranteed SLA. Okay, and hence, we kind of ensure that from a business impact perspective, non-availability of infrastructure and those kind of issues are drastically reduced. Okay. So what you're getting really is best of both. And like I mentioned, you have also the public cloud space available of the same invoice of the same contract. So another way of looking at this whole model, on the x-axis I've got time, on the y-axis I've got dollars. Okay. Now, if this dotted line represents your capacity utilization over a period of time, okay, so what we do in this model is we start monitoring the capacity on your behalf, managing this capacity. It's a services model, so I want to make sure that, the capacity that you need, ensuring capacity is always available to you, additional capacity or headroom is available ahead of demand and so on is available to you. Now, if you were to buy the infrastructure, what you typically do is make a guesstimate, based on certain, inputs that you'll probably get from your application vendor, from your own experience, from maybe your OEM or, your suppliers, partners, and so on. And, you'll spend a certain amount of dollars along the red line that you can see on your screen. Okay. So what we do in the flexible capacity model, like I mentioned, is it's a pay-per-use model. Okay, so hence this entire area between the actual capacity utilization and what you probably would have spent in purchase if you had bought it on capex becomes the savings in the flexible capacity model. Second thing we do in the flexible capacity model is, since we are monitoring the capacity and managing it, we start deploying in much smaller steps, thereby reducing all that power, cooling, space, all the services, the after warranty services and things like that. So we kind of optimize all of that. And of course, this is an SLA base, so ensuring that capacity is available ahead of demand is something that we undertake to perform as an SLA under this model. You may have certain projects that are coming in, and for which you may require additional capacity. So that's something we can discuss, and we can bring in more capacity as and when needed. Okay, and what this does for you is also, if you're thinking about completely moving to the cloud, then this facilitates a cloud migration strategy where you kind of start off with on-premise as a service, and then slowly try to move as many applications as you probably want to into the public cloud. Okay, so it facilitates that whole journey for you. Okay, of course, everything comes with its kind of fine print, and the fine print here is that there is a minimum payment that is due. Okay, the example I often give to people listening to this presentation is that think of your electricity bill at home. Okay, let's say you've got 3 air conditioners at home, so you'll probably go for, let's say, a 7 kilowatt connection at home. In 1 month you're traveling doesn't mean you'll get a zero bill, at home. You'll get certain minimum bill, which will come depending on the connected load. So this is very similar. There's a minimum bill that would come irrespective of whether you use the infrastructure or not for that particular month. Okay. The second element of your electricity bill at home is a unit of measure, okay, the ampere hour. So whether you're using heating, lighting, air conditioning, whatever, there's a very simple unit of measure. So similarly, in the flexible capacity model, for each type of capacity that's deployed in your data center, if you're thinking about compute servers, we think typically per server, per blade, per virtual machine, per container, those kind of units of measure. When we talk about storage, typically we talk about a per GB kind of unit of measure and so on. So for every type of capacity that goes into the data center, and we can cover pretty much the entire infrastructure that goes into the data center, okay, we've got a very simple unit of measure defined. And the last element of your electricity bill is a slab-wise rate. Now, in the flexible capacity model also, we give you a slab-wise rate. Difference being that unlike in your electricity bill, where the more you consume, more expensive it gets, here, the more you consume, the cheaper it gets. Okay. So again, they're band-wise. We give typically 4 bands, in terms of a pricing slab. And for each type of capacity per unit of measure, we kind of define what will be the per unit rate. And, we kind of, at the end of the month, like a postpaid mobile phone bill, generate a bill and send it across, which kind of computes to whatever has been pre-agreed with you. Interestingly, we can also include, certain amount of third-party equipment. It could be an air conditioning, it could be a UPS. It could be, certain applications come with a certain specific OEM brand that they want. So up to about 20 to 30% of the contract value can be non-HPE equipment. Frankly, after some time, these things stop mattering. Really what matters is the capacity and the SLA, availability of the capacity when you need it, for the duration that you need it. Okay. So what it lets you do is that you don't have to spend upfront. There's no surge in your budget, okay, and lets you align your costs with your business demands, okay, and you don't have to kind of land up spending a lot of money upfront. Okay. So, the whole process to kind of set this up is, we kind of do a discovery workshop, sit down with you and discuss what are your requirements, what are the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Based on that, we kind of document all of that in a contract. Okay, no payment to be made over here. Once the contract is signed, we send across the hardware, the software, install it and configure it, and set up the metering system. And the metering system, again, is a very, very simple system. All we are doing is, asking you for 1 VM, 1 vCPU, 1 VRAM, and 1 email account. No ports required to be opened in your data center. Okay, so absolutely taking care of your security considerations and things like that. And once a day, there's a script which runs in the VM, which goes to the equipment and asks it, okay, so how much is the utilization for today? Okay, so storage box will say I've got so many written GBs. Blade chassis would say, okay, so many blades are on, if it's server-based pricing and so on. Okay, and that data is collected by the VM once a day at a defined time. And through the email account, we populate a portal Customer has login access to the portal. We have login access to the portal. So at any point in time, one can kind of verify what is the usage. At the end of 30 days, we generate a report and send it across to the customer on email saying that this is the utilization for the last 30 days, average utilization for the last 30 days. Okay. 48 hours later, if there's no variation or no dispute or any of that, we send across the bill to the customer. So very simple process really, which can be kind of verified at any point in time. Okay. And this kind of process continues for the contract duration. Now, if you compare this with your typical purchasing kind of model or capex purchasing kind of model, when you're buying in capex, you think about hardware, software, and support, which we call the bill of material or the BOM. Okay. Now, to deliver the outcomes that you kind of typically want. Okay. So these outcomes may be a time to market, maybe a cash flow, maybe a reduced cost of operations and things like that. You need to put together a lot of things in terms of people, process, skills, and so on to make that happen. So in the flexible capacity contract, what we try to do is look at your business outcomes that you want to achieve and put together whatever it needs to make sure that whatever infrastructure that we are delivering or that BOM that we are delivering into your data center can deliver those outcomes, thereby allowing you to focus on your digital transformation journeys and let the infrastructure and the management of that remain with HPE. Okay? So we've been doing this, infrastructure support for many, many years, and like I mentioned, it's an SLA-based service. So now a lot of times I get asked, so how do the financials compare? So a simple example here, if you were buying, in the purchase kind of a model, you'd spend a lot of money up front, and then as and when you require certain additional enhancements in capacity, you'd keep adding that bit in. You'd kind of go back to your CFO and you'd ask for the money and, kind of spend that. Okay. So that's how the graph looks like when you're buying in CapEx in terms of the cash flow. But when we're deploying on the flexible capacity, like it's a postpaid mobile phone bill, every month a small bill coming in. So typically, as your business grows, your bill will ramp up, pretty smoothly. Okay, and you'll notice that there's a difference between the way your kind of cash flows would go in capex versus in flexible capacity. Okay, now most CFOs or finance organizations would kind of evaluate a purchase decision based on 5 parameters. Okay, that's the cash flows, the net present value, the ROI, the payback period, and the IRR. Okay, and typically a payback period on a capex investment of about, let's say, 3 to 3.4 years is an acceptable norm. Okay, in flexible capacity model, we kind of can prove that within about, let's say, 6 or 8 months, you're able to kind of recover your payback because as you're deploying infrastructure, getting it up and running, maximizing your benefits out of the infrastructure. So you're able to kind of recover your money very, very quickly. Okay, and in fact, on all 5 parameters, we're able to do an analysis and prove that if you had bought the same equipment under capex or a purchase, flexible capacity would be much better. Okay, so that's in terms of the financial analysis. Okay, I want to talk about risk. Okay, so I've taken a project lifecycle, design, implement, run, and manage. Okay. Now, typically, when you kind of go through the design phase, your application vendor and so on would come back and say, okay, that's the amount of infrastructure I require. Okay, so you'll end up spending a certain amount of money. Okay, and that becomes your upfront cash spend. Okay, now as you go through the implement and run phase, okay, if you're a government organization, probably look, this is the acceptance test phase. Okay, you don't require all that infrastructure upfront. You probably require that much of infrastructure upfront. Right, and when you get to this run phase or you've got acceptance phase, at this point 3 things could happen. You could kind of extend the run phase because business came back, there were more requirements added, more specifications added, so it gets extended a little bit. Or it could be that the project gets scrapped because it's not meeting its intended, objectives. Or it could be, we kind of planned this perfectly, and the capacity requirement starts ramping up. Now, this entire area, becomes cash preserved by you in the flexible capacity model because it's a pay-per-use. Okay, it becomes a risk shared by HPE because what if you decide to scrap the project over here? What if the kind of ramp up becomes slower and things like that? And of course, you've got an exit option over here which you wouldn't have in CapEx. So this is in terms of the financial risk. Then there's this whole thing about technology risk, right? So all of us know that technology, by the time you've acquired that capacity, gone through that long procurement cycle and acquired it, the technology is probably already obsolete. Now, about a year ago when I was talking to customers, they would typically talk about buying SAS disks and so on. Even SSD disks were about, I think, 1.92 terabyte SSD disks. This year, we talk about 3.68 and 3.86 and 7.68 terabyte disks. Next year, we'll probably talk about 15 terabyte SSD disks. We talk about this year everything being all flash and so on. So in just 1 year, technology is constantly evolving and will continue to evolve. Now, if you had bought last year and you had kind of bought for, let's say, a 3-year period, you'd be pretty much stuck with the technology you bought last year. And that technology, if I compare the per GB price on a 1.92 terabyte disk versus, let's say, a 15 terabyte disk, is a huge difference. Obviously, 15 terabyte is a denser piece of electronics, so the cost per GB is lower. Okay, so you'd miss out on those benefits. In the flexible capacity model, since we are not deploying all the capacity up front, as you go along this contract, you can keep kind of constantly staying abreast with whatever technology is and keep kind of getting the latest and best at the best available per unit price. Okay, so that's something one can easily do under this model. So this is in terms of the risk, the financial and technology risk. The other element of flexible capacity is the technology refresh. Now, if you remember the second slide I showed in terms of challenges in your data center, the second most important challenge was the user said was in terms of keeping abreast with technology. So in the flexible capacity model, the technology refresh at no additional cost is included, okay, at no additional cost. So I've got an example of servers. I'm deploying a certain capacity of servers in the first year, and I've taken a useful life of 4 years. Now, different organizations have different life of equipment. You may retire or tech refresh in 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. Some people do it in 3 years. Okay, so I've taken a 4-year term. Okay, so it can be extended to whatever your term you typically take. Second year, you added a little more capacity. Third year, you add a little more capacity. Fourth year, a little more. Okay, so what we're doing in the 5th year is the first year capacity that you kind of added, this first year capacity, we will refresh this. Okay, no additional cost, no kind of effect on your operations. So you always have the latest available to you. So this is in terms of compute or store servers. In storage, it gets a little more interesting. Okay, so we've deployed a storage box in the beginning of the term. Okay, and all the disks and drive cages that get added for the duration of the box, right? So let's say the duration of the box, the life of the box is 4 years. Okay, now in the 35th month, about 13 months before the contract is due to expire, I come back and ask you, do you want to do a tech refresh? If you say, yes, I want to do a tech refresh, we will come and install a new box. And mind you, you're paying only a per GB per month rate, which is not changing. So this is an investment that we make. And all the last year capacity is added in this new box. Okay, so you get an entire year, 12 months period, in which you can migrate the data and disks from the earlier controller box into the new controller box. Now, typically what happens today is that even if you're doing a tech refresh, it's like a very kind of disruptive process. You use the box, then you bring in a new box, and one fine day you need to migrate that entire data from one box to the other. It can get very painful. Here, as a process, we've defined it in such a way to make your life very, very easy, even if you need to migrate the data and so on. So there are a lot of additional services that come along with a flexible capacity contract within that per GB per month rate. And mind you, I've already said that I can prove the financials on this model will be better. So this capacity management, capacity metering, reporting, forecasting, and all of that is included in this. if you're going to keep enhancing capacity as and when you require, it requires somebody to create, that pricing approval process, helping you define change requests and so on. So that's something our team helps with, ensuring not best effort SLAs, but guaranteed SLAs also means we need to do a lot of preventive maintenance. Okay, it cannot be just reactive, that you have a problem, system is down, we need to recover it quickly. While all of that stays as is, in terms of what you need and what your business needs. But in addition to that, we also include a lot of preventive maintenance, the firmware, the patch management, the upgrades, the tech refresh planning, installation, deinstallation of hardware, and so on, so that, the best effort SLAs can be adhered to. And at the end of it, to perform all the above, it requires a certain amount of relationship management. It requires a team of people, named resources who understand you, who understand your environment, and, they can constantly plan, review, and support you in the manner that best suits you. Okay. So all of this is included in the flexible capacity contract. So now I'll summarize this here. So what we're saying is, unlike just a public cloud, this is on-prem and public. And like we discussed, on-prem comes with its, advantages. This model is single tenant, so it's not like a hosted model where a hosted service provider bought a big box and he's dividing that big box into small components which he's giving you. This is a 100% dedicated infrastructure model. Okay, you get to choose your technology. Okay, so what architecture choices that you need, your business needs, your application needs, all of that remains with you. It's unlike a product lease. It's not a financial arrangement. It's a services arrangement, the tech refresh planning, the additional services, capacity management, all of that, ensuring you don't over-provision. It's not like an EMI which you're paying every month. Okay, so different from product lease. And finally, different from any other offer available from anybody else in the market, because, it doesn't tie you to one vendor. At the same time, it can include your entire data center. The whole data center can be included in this model. Okay. So from an operational perspective, we are saying that capacity management becomes our responsibility, okay, and you gain from that. Buffer management, the preventive maintenance, and finally, any reactive calls that still happen. At the end of it, it's a piece of electronics. So, if a reactive situation happens, then ensuring that you can very quickly recover from that and there's very limited impact on your businesses, is something that we would kind of facilitate and kind of as a process set up in this model. Okay. Now, financial benefits, now everything may not apply to everybody, may not be relevant to everybody, but in general, things like cash and cash flow, is important for certain types of businesses. The flexibility is very important for most CIOs. The efficiency of not paying for what you don't use within your data center is important. And finally, the shared financial risk, very important from a CFO's perspective. Okay, so what we're saying is, as a summary, is you can reduce your operational cost. You don't have to pay anything up front. You only pay for what you use. Okay, it's very quick. We can do an unlimited tech refresh. The contract can be extended as many number of times as you want. Okay, you don't have to go through a long procurement process in this because the rates are agreed. From a risk perspective, again, it's very, very low. It frees up your staff to focus on innovation and in your digital transformation journey. Okay, and again, it's a reduced complexity because you can have your on-premise space and off-premise or public cloud space out of one contract. So next step, if this looks interesting for you, we kind of set up a kind of workshop with you where we scope your coverage, we can discuss what's the outcomes that you want to achieve. We identify the people, processes, and improvements in technology, and we've got a team to help to do that. Okay, so once we've done all of this, then we can kind of sit and discuss. Okay, what kind of arrangement do we need, and hence, it's a flexible capacity. I don't call this a private cloud within your data center and so on. It's just a flexible capacity arrangement. Okay, HPE has a lot of award-winning technologies and products. And I'm not going to run you through this, but flexible capacity, of course, is one of them. It's the leading award-winning service. We've been providing this for many, many years across the world, about 8-9 years. In India, we've been doing this for about 2.5 years. There are a few customers in India already on this model and getting the benefits of this model. Okay, so now with GST coming, in, it's going to be even easier to kind of manage such kind of services arrangements and compare them with the purchasing and things like that. Okay. Finally, I'll leave you with this thought that on YouTube there are a lot of customer videos, 3-4 minute customer videos where customers have gone and kind of said why they like the flexible capacity model. I would urge you to kind of go and look at them. So with this, thank you very much for your time, and I'm handing this back to the host. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gupta, for sharing those thoughtful insights. Now, dear delegates, it's time to take your questions. I would request all the participants, should you wish to ask any question, you may use the chat facility to send your questions to all panelists. Alternatively, you may send us the questions. You may press 0 and 1 on your telephone keypad to ask any audio questions. I repeat, ladies and gentlemen, should you wish to ask any question, you may send your questions using the chat facility, which is appearing in the right-hand side of your web console. Alternatively, you may press 0-1 on your telephone keypad. I repeat, it's 0 and 1 on your telephone keypad to ask any questions. By the time we have the questions get queued, I would like to turn the program to Mr. Apila Ghosh for any questions which has received offline. Over to you, Mr. Ghosh.
Right. Thanks, Shuradeep. Anurag, thank you so much for the great presentation. Right. Very insightful. And until we get questions from the audience, I think somewhere you did mention about the commercials. So, I mean, as you rightly mentioned, but just asking probably from the point of view from the audience, is there any way where we can actually do like a TCO for flex capacity? Are there any ways to do that?
Oh yes, absolutely. I think that's one of the important when organizations, kind of establish the cash flows. TCO is the way to calculate it. So for the duration of the period of the contract, one would kind of try to verify, okay, if I kind of bought this equipment, then, what would it have cost me, adding in the business benefits, adding in those depreciation benefits and, all of that. And if I bought this under the services model, what's the benefit I would get? So yes, I mean, absolutely doing TCO analysis is part of this whole, understanding process of flexible capacity.
Right. And just to take your brains into this, how would you, what would be your guidelines to a CIO? How would be the ideal framework to, run a data center financially efficiently? But that's very critical because, yes, we agree there is the IT infrastructure piece, that efficiency is around that, and everybody's trying to achieve that. But what is the way one can actually run a data center financially very effectively? What is the right mix?
So, yeah, I would say, I would, if I were a CIO, I would divide the workloads into 2 parts. One would be the core, let's say an R&D center, then your IP-related applications are core. Okay. If you're a business, then, any of those business applications are core and so on. I would, kind of think that those need to stay on my premise. Okay. And hence, from a data center efficiency perspective, from provisioning perspective and so on, I would make sure that only those applications sit there. Then there's this whole non-core piece, okay? So non-core can again get divided into 2 parts, something that are long-term loads and something that are short-term loads, like test and dev systems and so on, Q&A systems. Short-term loads, not very confidential data, I can kind of, I need it for some time, then I don't need it. I'm not going to download too much of data. Upload is fine anyway, and I don't need to take it back. Those kind of loads are perfect fit for a public cloud. Okay, and then you have these non-core loads which are long-term. I'd probably look for some kind of co-location facility, where I can kind of ensure that the cost is fixed and predictable. So I would kind of take a strategy to kind of have all 3 options available to me, and then as the requirements keep coming up from business, and based on my own analysis of what the costs and where they are, I would keep scaling up, scaling down within the 3 data centers or 3 options that are available to me.
Right.
And I'd ideally choose a very strong partner, ideally an OEM who kind of can manage that whole thing for me, because at the end of the day, it would be somewhat, the business impact of having a downtime would be very, very high.
Right. So I have 2 questions here for you, Anurag. One is from Mooneshwar and one is from Kishore. Those very similar. So one is asking what is the minimum percentage growth year-on-year prerequisite to propose flex capacity. The second one that the other one that they are asking is what is the minimum basic criteria which is need to qualify for flex capacity. What we're basically trying to understand is, I mean, how small do I really need to be, or big do I need to be, to make sure that flexibility actually is the right fit for me?
Okay, very good questions. So I'll take the second one first. So the minimum, kind of capacity that is required to start off with a flexible capacity contract, we typically look at either 16 servers, 16 blades, or about 40 terabyte of storage. Okay, can be a hybrid, can be an all-flash, whatever is required. So that's the start capacity one would look at. Okay, of course, everything works in terms of a volume. So if the capacity is larger to start with, that is okay. So that's the kind of minimum deal that I would look for. It's more of capacity than deal value. Okay.
Right.
The second question, or the first question, which was asked in terms of what is the minimum growth percentage.
Right.
So now, let's say you're thinking of buying under a CapEx kind of a model. Okay, you'd say, okay, what's my useful life? How much of capacity would I require for, let's say, about 2-3 years, and so on? And you'd buy capacity. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we say is that, that's an important thing to look at, because you want to make sure that if, you're expecting a certain amount of growth to happen in a 3 to 5 year period, then we want to get the architecture right. We don't want to kind of, get those pieces wrong. So getting the architecture right is important. But whatever is installed is committed. All the rest is only forecast. So there's no minimum percentage prerequisite in terms of growth percentage. There is no minimum.
Right, right.
It's non-committed. I mean, it's forecasted. You're expecting that as per the business projections, your business is expected to grow constantly. You require more capacities. All of that we kind of sit and define and make sure that, your pricing is committed for that capacity if you were to reach that capacity. But if you don't, that's okay. I mean, nobody's going to bind you to that.
Right, right. Great. Yep. Shrodip, any questions that the audience would want to ask in person?
Yes, we have a question here from Mr. Sandeep from ZTV. Your line is unmuted. You may please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, so my question is basically what I've understood from the flexible capacity that HP means you'll be deploying the storage, the compute box, as well as the storage at customer's data center. So yes, definitely, and we will pay as per the usage. But what about the DC administration? Because a lot of money goes in the DC administration as well. So that cost is also included in your, means HP will take care of the administration part also, or is it like the customer has to maintain their own data center?
So in terms of those additional operational support services, automation, all of those tasks that typically you would do at the data center, those things are optional. HP can provide that. There's an additional cost for that, but yes, we can definitely provide that as part of this contract. So like a managed services contract, if I understand your question right, including the infrastructure and ensuring, all of that data center is managed, yes, definitely can be provided. It's an optional service, but yes, it can be provided.
Okay. Fair enough.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, Anurag, I have one more question that a gentleman has asked here from, his name is Vishal Singhania. What he's asking, what would be the uptime in case we don't have a DR in place?
So uptime, is like they say, the chain is as strong as the weakest link. So uptime is a function of the entire everything, the entire ecosystem of that data center. Okay, so one would want to make sure that the architecture, the deployment is designed in such a way that if there's an uptime requirement or particular uptime that this whole solution needs to be designed for, then we're getting all the pieces right in terms of architecture. But once that is in place, yes, one can kind of define what uptime is required. It could be 99 point whatever number of nines, or it could be lower. So that's absolutely something that's possible and doable. Okay, then that's something we can commit to as part of this contract.
Good. I think last question is a question for Balaji Nagarajan. What he's asking is, what is the minimum deal value to qualify? So would you want to answer that?
Yeah, like I mentioned, it's more about capacity than deal value. Okay. Yeah, so there's no minimum deal value. It's more about capacity. It's more about, if, there is a lot of variability, unpredictability, and those kind of whatever the outcomes that need to be achieved, are we able to achieve it more efficiently, in the flexible capacity model? Are we able to achieve it more efficiently on an on-prem model and a public cloud model? And those things keep changing. Business is dynamic. It's not static. So, having the right mix at the right time is equally important. So, yeah, I mean, there's no minimum deal value.
Right. Interesting question. I don't know whether how you would like to answer this. Somebody is asking again, Manushya, is can flex capacity be proposed if customer is hosting his infrastructure in a public data center? Yes,
absolutely, it can be done. NetMagic, SIFI, they're all partners of HPE. They buy a lot of equipment from HPE. So they have various models. But right. Yes, co-locating is definitely possible. In fact, we've got a couple of models.
If I am running my data center in, say, NetMagic's site, in a co-location, yes. Right?
Yes.
Can I still go for flex capacity?
Yes, of course you can.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Which makes it truly hybrid in many ways then.
Yes. So like I mentioned, you divide the workload into three parts. The core, non-core, divide the non-core into short-term, long-term, and then, place it appropriately, and that mix is going to keep changing. And that's why flexible capacity for my, I think is very, very interesting.
Right. Perfect. Thanks. Shrodip, any more questions that we have from the audience before we call it a day?
No, we do not have any more questions.
Perfect. Right, so that's it from my end at least. Thank you all for being part of today's session. Anurag, any last words before we call it a evening?
Yes, so I would kind of just say this, that their flexible capacity gives you a lot of flexibility, okay? But business is dynamic. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. I mean, a lot of Fortune 500 companies that existed 5 years ago probably have become something else today. HPE itself is an example. We used to be, I think, a $130 billion company 1.5 years or 2 years ago. Today, the HPE enterprise piece is probably about $30 billion. We've split ourselves into 5 companies, and we're doing that from a shareholder perspective, from a customer perspective. Businesses are constantly innovating, and to make upfront calls for 5 years is very, very tough. It's very challenging. Maybe one was compelled to do that earlier, but you don't have to do that anymore. Okay, you kind of don't need to choose everything in one place or the other. You can have it all. Okay, and that's what flexible capacity brings to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all the participants who joined us today. Before we give the closing comments, I would like to remind to all the attendees, kindly fill in the feedback form, which will just appear after the session gets over. And on behalf of HPE and CMR, I would like to thank all the participants for joining this webinar. We hope it has been a useful time spent with us. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a good day.